Imagine you get home after work and turn on the news. The first story you see is about an automaker recalling thousands of vehicles, including the one you just parked in the garage. Unfortunately, accidents happen in the manufacturing process and cause recalls. Who has the most recalls in car history? These 14 stand out as the most significant. Number 1. Tesla Cybertrucks. The biggest recall of 2024 was the Tesla Cybertruck. In early summer, the top electric vehicle manufacturer recalled nearly all 12,000 Cybertrucks because of the windshield wiper and plastic trim in the bed. Investigators said driving the truck could cause the plastic to detach from it, causing significant hazards for the operator and surrounding drivers. While the recall was substantial, it wasn't the only one in the Tesla Cybertruck's short history. The Cybertruck debuted in 2023 and has already demonstrated numerous problems despite not being a year old. Previous recalls include a failing windshield wiper motor, a faulty accelerator pad, and an incorrect font size on the electrical system. Tesla is the premier EV manufacturer in the US, so you may be interested in the Cybertruck. However, you should consider all safety aspects before visiting one of their showrooms. Number 2. GM recalls 3.7 million cars in 1973. General Motors recalled 3.7 million vehicles due to faulty stone guard assembly. The assembly that was supposed to prevent stones from bouncing up and getting lodged in the car's undercarriage didn't work correctly. Stones could get caught so that it stopped the car from turning to the left. Unfortunately, vehicles under the GM umbrella didn't have the proper assembly. Fortunately, this recall was one of the most straightforward fixes. GM retrofitted its Buick, Chevy, Oldsmobile, and Pontiac cars with a bolt-on stone guard. That's all it took to get these bad boys back on the road. Number 3. Tesla recalls 4.1 million vehicles in 2022. Tesla is a relative newcomer to the automotive industry, debuting on the world stage in 2008. Since then, the EV producer has encountered problems and recalls. In early 2023, announced a 360,000 vehicle recall, bringing their total since 2022 to 4.1 million. Tesla ranks second only behind Ford with the most recalls in this span. The primary problems have originated with the self-driving system. The cars will not entirely stop at stop signs like they're supposed to, and they keep driving straight in turn-only lanes. These problems have caused doubt about autonomous vehicles and made existing cars unsafe. Number 4. Ford recalls 4.1 million cars in 1972.
Ford dealer for a pickup. Works like a truck, rides like a car.
Nowadays, most drivers fasten their seatbelts as a force of habit. You don't even think about this in your routine. A half-century ago, seatbelts were less standard, making cars less safe. The government mandated seatbelts in 1959, and Ford only took a decade to find trouble with theirs. By 1972, they found faulty seatbelts when its vehicles got into accidents. One problem was that the seatbelts were too short, thus making it difficult for people to use them. Ultimately, Ford replaced all the faulty seatbelts and paid a fine. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration fined Ford $95,000, in today's money, about $500,000. Number 5. GM recalls 6.4 million cars in 1981. GM appeared on the list once, and the recalls only get larger from here. In 1981, the auto manufacturing giant recalled over 6 million vehicles because their rear suspension bolt was faulty. Inspectors found the bolt rusted more easily than acceptable, forcing the rear control arms to drop to the ground. Rust is only suitable for your car if you intentionally let your rat rod truck corrode for a particular aesthetic. Unfortunately, losing the rear suspension bolt caused cars to spin out of control. The only time you need spinning is to do burnouts after winning a NASCAR race. 27 drivers reported accidents stemming from this recall, prompting quick fixes. That said, more instances make GM one of the most recalled car brands. Number 6. GM recalls 6.7 million cars in 1971. GM had severe problems a decade before, this time with the motor mount. Imagine you crank the engine while your car sits in the driveway. Your vehicle shouldn't move until you shift gears and press the accelerator. However, GM owners found the car moved independently when the motor mount broke, causing the engine to life. The throttle became stuck open, causing the vehicle to accelerate by itself. GM had to recall nearly 7 million vehicles, the largest automobile recall at the time. The recall affected Chevrolet specifically, with 63 accidents and 18 injuries with the cars. This time, the recall affected the Chevrolet Camaro and the other full-sized vehicles. If your grandparents owned a light truck between 1965 and 1970, it was also a part of this recall. Number 7. Toyota recalls 7.4 million cars in 2012. In the fall of 2012, Americans were focused on the presidential election and Toyota's major recall. This Japanese automaker typically has safe cars. In fact, Consumer Reports ranks Toyota and Lexus as the most reliable automakers in the world. However, Toyota ran into problems with its power window switches. Over 7 million Toyota vehicles with power windows had faulty switches that could catch fire. Cars generally work better when not on fire, so Toyota recalled millions of units worldwide. After an investigation, Toyota found the lock switch had bad grease jobs that corroded the lock, thus increasing the fire risk. This problem is significant for everyday driving, but imagine it happens while road tripping or in busy traffic. Number 8. Ford recalls 7.9 million cars in 1996. Another Ford recall makes its way on the list from the 1996 event. Nearly 30 years ago, Ford recalled its vehicles and units from Lincoln and Mercury between 1988 and 1993. This time, the ignition switch was the culprit. The electronics in the switch were faulty, causing overheating and dashboard fires. The recall was massive, affecting nearly 8 million vehicles across 3 brands. The worst part of Ford's recall history was they knew about the ignition switch issue about 5 years before formally declaring it. Fixing ignition issues involves adding lubrication or checking the gear shift. Number 9. Volkswagen recalls 8.5 million cars in 2016. Now, we're at one of the biggest car recalls in history because it harmed the automaker's reputation. In the 2010s, automakers began upping emissions testing to ensure the cars followed government regulations. New laws have forced strict rules on auto manufacturers to reduce their environmental impact. However, some people thought they could get away with cheating. In 2016, Volkswagen recalled more than 8 million vehicles because they manipulated the emissions control systems in diesel engines. These machines would pass the emissions test by providing inaccurate data. Thus, the cars emitted more than they were supposed to. To this day, folks still remember Volkswagen's manipulation. Number 9. Toyota recalls 9 million cars in 2010. Toyota reappears on this list with an even bigger recall than the 2012 incident. In 2010, Americans and the rest of the world were still reeling because of the Great Recession. The last thing they needed was to hear about problems with their vehicles, but a faulty gas pedal caused significant Toyota recalls worldwide. Toyota and Lexus initially blamed the floor mats for their vehicles accelerating out of control, only to find the gas pedal was the issue. This event was one of the biggest car recalls in history because of the death toll. Reports indicate 89 people died and 57 suffered injuries due to the acceleration issues. Number 10. Ford recalls 17.5 million cars between 1999 and 2009. If you're looking to save gas, one of your best options is to utilize cruise control. This system keeps your vehicle moving steadily, reducing the need to accelerate and decelerate on the highway. Therefore, your engine works effortlessly and consumes less fuel. Ford drivers took advantage of this in the late 90s and early 2000s until a recall stopped cars in their tracks. During this time, Ford owners reported their steering wheels were catching fire. You'd expect a hot steering wheel in the summer heat, but not enough to create flames. Once your steering wheel catches fire, the trail could lead to other critical parts of your machine. The last thing you want is an explosion causing severe harm or even death. Number 12. Ford recalls 21 million cars in 1980. The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody made transmissions easier for younger audiences to remember. PRNDL stands for park, reverse, neutral, drive and low. When you put a car in park, you expect the vehicle to remain still. However, a Ford recall in 1980 occurred because cars were reversing instead of parking. This simple misunderstanding could be dangerous when in parking lots or any road. The culprit here was a faulty transmission. The gearshift has pieces separating the park and reverse options, but the component could slip. Thus, the car thinks it's supposed to reverse when the operator wants to park. Ford saved money on its recall costs by placing a safety label on the dashboard warning drivers of mishaps. The company's multiple instances make it one of the most recalled brands. Number 13. GM recalls 27 million cars in 2014. GM has set its place in history as one of the most recalled car brands, considering the numerous instances in recent years. The manufacturer dealt with an ignition switch recall of 27 million vehicles in 2014, leading to multiple lawsuits. For example, GM vehicle owners filed a class action lawsuit alleging their car values dropped because of the news. Before the recall, 24 people died due to accidents involving the defect. The worst part of the recall might be that GM knew about the problem before it happened. Investigators say the ignition switch issues arose 10 years before the official recall. Another critical element was GM allegedly hid information from investigators and told employees not to disclose information to the public. Altogether, the 2014 GM incident was among the most significant in recall history. Number 14. Takata recalls 65 million cars since 2013. Now, you can see the biggest car recalls in history that are still going on. While they're not a car company, the Takata Corporation made parts for household names in the industry. Ford, Toyota, Nissan, BMW, and other giants relied on Takata airbags because complaints said these components ruptured and injured drivers. Original reports set the recall at around 42 million vehicles, but that number has only grown in the last decade. Takata's recall is ongoing, and drivers are worrying about the safety of their vehicles. Cars with the most recalls most likely have these airbags, so it's worth checking your machine to see if it's part of the massive safety news. As of 2024, the recall has increased to 67 million airbags, so expect it to continue growing. Who has the most recalls in history? It'll be hard to come close to Takata's disaster. Cars are essential for many people's daily commute. They're great machines that are fun to drive until something goes wrong. Honest mistakes happen in production, and sometimes, companies try to cheat the system with shady practices. Recalls have happened since Ford's Model T in the early 20th century, so they're not news. Thank you for your attention and have a nice day.